2 people. This is testable. Yeah.
That diversity doesn't mean a different color range, you know.
Okay. What does it mean then?
It's just like a different mentality or a different background, like what you bring to the table is different than what everyone.
Great. We're going to talk about that today. So I'm glad I'm in alignment to that. One other thing. Yes.
You build your personal brand well enough and you're invaluable to any organization.
Great. Great. And have you started to implement that some way in what you're doing?
Yeah,
Have you thought about that?
I've tried to. I've done a lot of different things in my life as far as work goes.
Uh-huh.
And so just trying to take like key things from influential people and then build myself.
Great. Well, I'm like you then, because I've worked at a lot of places. I've done a lot of, well, oh wait, maybe I picked up the wrong one. There we go. That's a fake one. I've done a lot of things, and so trying to figure out what my personal brand is interesting. I grew up here. I referenced this beautiful shot from the 1980s when I met my wife here in Provo. I went to the University of Utah. I worked in New York as an investment banker for a while, and then on the West Coast in LA and San Francisco. Built a company here in the 90s and sold it to a company called About.com, and then worked at Infusionsoft. So I've lived a lot of places and I've done a lot of things. And the one thing I've wondered about my personal brand is, and I didn't think about it much till probably the last 5 years ahead of me, thinking about it and being challenged to think about it. And I really realized the thing that is most important to me is helping people and organizations reach their potential. And it didn't matter what my job was. That's the thing I cared the most about. And when I moved back here, part of that understanding for me was determining what I wanted to do in the next phase of my career in life. And that's what I'm doing now, is trying to help people and organizations understand and reach their potential. So that's kind of become what I'm about. And I think it's always been there. It's always driven my decisions. It's why I liked going to work. It's why I like doing the work that I did. But I've come to understand that about me, which has helped me, and now that's what I'm all about. And that's a change for me. And I'm kind of going off on my own to do that instead of work for somebody, and that's also a change. And a lot of people have the dream that they want to work for themselves. I've never had that dream. I always liked working with people to do something big. It usually involves some investors, and I liked that. So this is a change for me right now, and part of that is developing this idea about the breakthrough mindset. So I want to start with a little history because I love history. I like a lot of things, and history is one of them. So does anybody know this guy? Well, I checked LinkedIn, and he's a smart guy. He's got a lot of background. His name's Professor Langley, and I won't go over all his credentials, but you can see he's a very smart guy, a professor of mathematics, a professor of astronomy, and also ran the Smithsonian, which at the time, at kind of the turn of the century, 1800 to 1900, was the most scientific institution in the United States. So very, very smart guy, very capable guy. Also good at fundraising. Back then, when he got this Series A financing, he got $50,000 from the War Department and $20,000 from the Smithsonian, which is the equivalent of millions of dollars today. So he had the trust of the government. He had the trust of the people. He raised money, all to go after something that was super important to the United States and to the world, which was trying to get a human to fly. So this was the guy that was going to get it done. And he published some super important scientific some scientific papers about that. Anybody know these two guys? The Wright brothers, right? So the Wright brothers, and what do we know about them? They don't have a LinkedIn profile, and why would they? They didn't graduate from high school, so they're not going to be talking about how smart they are. So I had to find them in a little different way, learn about them, and they own a bike store. So guys that didn't get to college, not professors, not scientists, they own a bike store. Bikes were kind of new technology, actually. When they started the bike store, they were kind of early in that, but not really, guys that have credentials. The government didn't know about them. They hadn't written in any journals. They hadn't taught any classes at a university. But they did have passion about what they were doing. They cared about it, and they had a great process of sort of investigating science. And as you know, who won the prize for figuring out how to get a guy off the ground and into the air? The Wright brothers, right? We all know the end of the story. It's curious. I think you might ask yourself this question right now. Why did the smartest guy that had millions of dollars to solve this problem lose to a couple of guys who couldn't graduate from high school? Yeah.
Simon Sinek makes this comparison between the two, and he talks about the fact that as soon as the Wright brothers started flying and Robert Langley heard about it, Robert Langley stopped. And so he could have said like, "Oh, that's great. I'll take your technology and improve on it, and we all these things." But he didn't have. He was after the notoriety
Okay.
of building the first airplane, even though it wasn't called the first flying machine.
Yep.
And because he wasn't the first to do that, he quit. Whereas like the Wright brothers were passionate about it, and they didn't have an option to fail. Like desperation yielded the best results.
Great. All true. Did you ever hear
I
that?
would
Yeah.
just say that they had a different mindset. They thought differently, whether that was in the design itself or in their attitude and dedication, stuff like
Yeah.
that. They thought differently.
Do you know how they thought differently?
No.
They did think differently. You're exactly right. They did think differently. They read a paper by Langley that helped them get to where they were going. So they actually loved Langley. This wasn't like a competitive fight where they didn't. I mean, they actually used the research that he'd done earlier in how they thought about it. Does anybody know what inspired them to even go the route they went? They took very different scientific approaches. Anybody know what they were inspired by? They studied birds. And you're like, oh yeah, imagine that. The thing that does fly, that's what I'll watch and see if I can learn from it. Langley went to the science books, and by the way, not a bad strategy either. Back then this was all obviously, right? But they studied birds and studied gliding, and actually they got up in the plane thousands of times, or in the machine thousands of times. They glided, they learned how to control a glider, and Langley, and they believed that maneuvering the plane was the critical part of the invention. Langley believed it was propulsion. So Langley shot a plane out of a cannon, so to speak, or a catapult on a river, and it just went into the river twice. And he had all the press there, Washington Post and New York Times, and failed a couple of times miserably and was really embarrassed. And of course, what did the government say after that? Well, this is just too hard of a job. It's probably not possible. Because their guy couldn't do it. So they assumed, well, this is going to take years, and we're not really as close as we thought. And then a couple of weeks later, the Wright brothers cracked the code. So it's a poignant story worth learning about, but there's a really great principle of leadership in this. And we've touched on it, and you guys have brought up some of those things. Mindset, approach, why, the why behind what they did. We're going to talk about that, but it's a really great story to illustrate that. I want to share this stat with you, that only 9.2% of people ever achieve their New Year's resolutions. And we could just say that applies whether you think New Year's resolutions are a good idea or not. People aren't getting stuff done they want to get done. Like, we should, as humans, say, that's a crappy statistic. I don't want to be part of that group. And I'd say you guys, by being here, are saying I don't want to be part of that group. But the truth is, we fail at a lot of things. And we don't get the things we want. And there's a reason for that. that I want to share with you because I think it's kind of simple to understand, but it's not easy to do. I got a belief that pure willpower works for about 9.2% of the people. And the rest of us don't have the willpower to get everything done we want to get done. We're distracted by some things, we get worn out. And, is there another way we can look at the problem to help us see how we could get better results? Like, couldn't we get 90% of the things we want to set our minds to? And what could we do besides just having sheer willpower to do it? By the way, if you have willpower, awesome. You're ahead of most of us. But most of us have so much other going on in our lives, it's hard to have the willpower just to do that one thing. So I'm going to share some things that I hope will help you understand that'll help you in your career and in your lives and in your studies. And we're going to think back on Professor Langley and the Wright brothers as sort of a way to think about that. So I have this belief that we all have infinite potential, that we all really have the things we need in us to do whatever we want to do. And the Wright brothers are good proof of this. There's good evidence, and there's lots of evidence of people who have no education, who come from horrible conditions, and they achieve amazing, remarkable things that are unimaginable to most of us. And we never would have bet on them. So that's evidence to me that it isn't just the degrees you have, and it isn't just what you were born, what the household you were born into, but actually that all of us, everybody on the earth has this potential to do the great things that we want to do and the things that the world needs from us. There's a problem, however. We end up, as we get older, and you guys are lucky because Gordon and I are a lot older than you. We got a bigger problem than you do because you're kind of new at life. But we start to create some boundaries for ourselves. So if we think we have infinite potential, if we want to believe that premise, let's just say we all believe it for a minute. What takes it from being infinite and endless for us to being very narrow so that we only get 9.2% of the stuff done that we want to get done? The boundaries we create come from identities and stories we have about ourselves. And these come from what our coach told us when we were playing Little League, or maybe what our parents told us, or we have a mean older sibling, or somebody else in the neighborhood that bullied us. Just a lot of things. A lot of things happen to us, and some of those things start to take us from thinking infinitely to thinking very finitely. And we're going to do a little exercise. So you can be thinking about this because we're going to work on this in a minute. But all of a sudden, what was all possible as we get older and as we have experiences in our families and in our communities and at school, and we get a bad grade, and it traumatizes us. And by the way, some really horrible things happen to people. They grow up in countries where there's war. They grow up in countries where there's not freedom, And all of those things can add to the identities and the stories we have about ourselves. And I'll just tell you this, and I think there's a whole bunch of scientific evidence to back this up. Social media is not helping this. I'm not here to talk about social media. But social media, when you think about it, is all about creating identities. And people work really hard to create an identity that sometimes is not who they are. And that causes problems for other people who think it is who they are. So it's not helping this situation to keep us from doing our best. So these stories and these identities that we have about ourselves, and by the way, this relates to your brand, your personal brand as well. When they start their will on us, then they start to limit our growth, our happiness, our performance, and how we can succeed. And it isn't that they are bad or good, right or wrong. What they are is troublesome in when we want to move forward. And you're going to find in your life, if you haven't already, that sometimes you get stuck. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but you probably will, where you're just like, I can't seem to get past this. I can't seem, it's right there for me, whatever it is. I just can't get there. I can't get it. I can't get that job. I can't get that relationship that I want with someone that I care about. I can't seem to get along with my parents. I struggle to get the grades that I want, that I think I'm capable of. I'm sure everybody here believes they are capable of a lot, right? I'm hoping that most of you believe you have infinite potential, that you really have capacity to do great things. You plan on doing great things. That's the best part of being young, is that you believe that because it's true. The world kicks it out of us as we get older. And then we get old enough to where we don't believe it anymore. But there's this part of life, kind of, I believe, that starts, about the time you leave junior high-ish to probably till you're old enough to stop caring what people think, because you're old and you went to the dermatologist and they burned a bunch of stuff off your forehead like I did yesterday and got a biopsy, and you start to see your mortality differently, and then you stop believing some of those things. But these stories and identities really limit you, and they get in your way, and we're going to talk about that. There's a great story, and there's a great metaphor in biology. We got a caterpillar. What do we know about the caterpillar? What's the caterpillar's identity?
Wants to become a butterfly.
Is that the caterpillar's identity? Is it walking around thinking that? What's the caterpillar's primary job? Eat, right? Caterpillar's like what? Fast, slow, smart, dumb, what? Slow, maybe dumb. Not all it can do is eat, right? Think about, some Disney show that I can't remember, Bug's Life maybe, but like the caterpillar was this big oaf with the German accent. I don't know why they picked German accents, because Germans are generally have an identity of being smart, but, kind of funny talking, slow, only thought about eating. Whenever there was a crisis, only thinking about eating, right? There's an identity for the caterpillar. We know the end of the story, but does the caterpillar know the end of the story? Right? So its only job is to eat. How far does the caterpillar travel?
Just far enough.
Just far enough to the next leaf. Never leaves the tree. Never leaves the tree, right? So it works on its job, has an identity. I wouldn't call it graceful. Sometimes called creepy, creeps some people out, right? Nobody's entering the caterpillar into a beauty contest. Obviously not going to get a Nobel Prize, win the gold medal in the 100 meters, right? Like, caterpillar's pretty lame and boring. That's the identity of the caterpillar. And that's the truth. The caterpillar has in it, and I'm not sure it even knows it, because we haven't asked the caterpillars this yet, but that's a good question to ask. It has in it DNA to do something after it stops eating. It starts to make this transformation, right? We all know this because we did this in probably second or third grade. We caught some caterpillars and put them in a terrarium, and we watched this process because it's such a cool process in science, and it's such a miracle. So this identity of the caterpillar goes through this process, and out comes, as we heard, a butterfly, right? What's the identity of the butterfly? Beautiful. Could enter the beauty contest. It's something that, we marvel at and take photos of. How far does the butterfly travel? Thousands of miles. This butterfly does. Beautiful, flies, stays in the same place, can travel, gets off the ground and can now fly, right? Crazy transformation. Here's what's interesting. The caterpillar actually, when it forms the chrysalis, dissolves itself. This doesn't look like a caterpillar that grew wings, does it? It didn't just grow wings and now it can fly. It actually dissolved itself into a goop, but it had in it something called imaginal disc. It had DNA in it of a butterfly, at the atomic level, right? At the DNA level. It had a blueprint for a butterfly. It didn't know It couldn't do anything about it. It just knew that when it formed the chrysalis, it secretes enzymes that dissolved itself. Completely stopped being a caterpillar, not a caterpillar, stopped being a caterpillar and started building to be a butterfly. That's a pretty cool idea. And then that butterfly, migrates sometimes in generations, thousands of miles to Mexico. The monarch does. That's a pretty cool idea. And that's what's important to understand from this principle in science, is that you have the DNA to have that infinite potential. But sometimes you have to stop doing a lot of things. You have to dissolve yourself, so to speak, and change your identity and stop being a certain person to be something greater, right? That means giving up some things. So we're going to talk about that. And you can think about saying, okay, what do I need to clear off my canvas? What do I need to stop doing? This is an exercise, we do in leadership all the time where you sit down with someone and say, okay, let me give you some feedback. And you want to do this yourself. What should I start doing and what should I stop doing? And what should I continue doing, right? But sometimes you're going to want to just clear the canvas and restart. And the world demands this more than it ever has. Why is that? Why was it okay to be a farmer and always a farmer 200 years ago? That's all there was. And everyone was super happy with that. And there was no reason to be anything else. And if you were, you probably starved. So there's no incentive. What's different about today?
There's endless possibilities.
Endless possibilities. How do you know there's endless possibilities? One word.
The internet.
The internet. Right? Simple as that. Today, consumers and employees have more power than the companies and the brands, right? When you're in a company now, you have more control. The company to tell you what to do. When I started working on Wall Street, I worked 80 to 90 hours a week, and my dad told me, my dad was an elementary school teacher, so what did he know? He just said, whatever you do when you go to work, you just do what your boss says. And I did, right? So I worked all those hours and didn't ever complain and didn't ever say, you know what? I got a pretty good brain. I'm pretty successful. I'm not going to give you my effort if you're going to treat me like that. But the internet enabled us all to know, well, because now I can just go somewhere else because there's endless possibilities. By the way, thanks to the millennials, thank you guys for telling all the businesses that that's the truth, and you're going to leave if they don't treat you fairly. That helps all of us. So I want to thank you for that. Business is better. Business is better because you have said we aren't going to put up with it. Business is better. I've always believed that's how business should be, so it's not a big change for me, but I think it's a cool opportunity for me because I have that philosophy too. I just didn't dare do it and know how to do it. I was a farmer, so to speak, back then. I'm like, I don't have a lot of choices. I got to stick with this. And that's what my dad told me. Now my son, who's now 29, lives in San Francisco, but when he was 19, I was trying to give him some advice, and he said, yeah, thanks, but I've got the internet. I was a little offended. I'm not going to lie, that hurt my feelings a little bit because I thought I could help him and give him some advice, and I'd been pretty successful. Wanted to help him, but I also had to face the truth that he did have the internet, and he could learn in a short period of time things that have taken me a lifetime, plus he could learn a lot more than I don't even know. So that's all cool. That's really awesome. And as I mentioned earlier, it can cause some problems too, right? But this is an opportunity for you to have a blank canvas and to think about at any time in your life, do you want to let go of some things so you can be something bigger and better, so you can, be like the caterpillar to become the butterfly. So here's a little data for you about leadership identity. The identity of the leader is super critical and has big impact on retaining employees and profitability. So how a leader shows up, acts, looks, behaves, and treats people has impact on the whole organization. And we aren't talking about small businesses here. These aren't small businesses. These are big businesses where the CEO probably doesn't know the name of 99% of the people. But the identity of that CEO makes a difference, by big factors. Not like 10 and 20%, but by like X, 3X, 4X, 13X. Super important. And obviously, I hope everybody believes that good leadership drives performance. And it's more important now than it's ever been because of what I just said. Because people expect. You guys will not work for somebody that's going to treat you like an asset versus a human being. If you're just a lever for profit, you aren't going to like your work and you will leave because there are places who are going to treat you like a human, right? So this is important. It's an important leadership principle. And you guys know this. We have a harder time talking to older people about this because they're not sure they want to believe it. Fortunately, you guys are buying in because you helped create it. But there's great data to prove it. Here's the thing. Do you think Langley, as smart as he was, knew about leadership? Do you think there was military examples? Do you think he was working with the President of the United States? Do you think he knew about leadership? I would say he probably did. And did the Wright brothers know much about leadership? Did they hang out with the President? No. Did they take classes? No. What they did was have passion about what they did, and they had something that mattered to them. They shared that with people, and those people got just as excited about it. Langley, on the other hand, was doing a job. He was making a lot of money. I mentioned that the Wright brothers got up in a plane either in the glider or their flying machine thousands of times. How many times relative to that did Langley get in his plane? Or get in the invention that he was trying to fly? Where did he stand when it was getting catapulted into the river? Not even on the boat, right? He stood on the side with the reporters in a nice suit, ready to get a picture taken, right? Different kind of leader identity. And the Wright brothers, I don't think they knew they were leading. They just cared about what they were doing. They said why it mattered to them and the world, and people were attracted to it. And Langley paid people and had the money to pay lots of people. And those people did it for a job. And they looked at their leader who was there to take sort of credit for it on the sidelines and not risk learning. And really that, in truth, that's what it came down to. The Wright brothers got in the machine and tried and hit the ground and said, I don't want to do that again. I got to figure out a different way. So they learned faster. They tested more. They were doing it to survive. Langley never was at risk, right? So he didn't innovate as quickly. And he also had a hypothesis that was wrong. He didn't study birds. He believed in propulsion and the physics of propulsion. So it's interesting. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to start with these two guys. See, I got a couple of, four. I got 4 millennials. I know what you guys like. So, even though this movie came out when I was in like 8th grade, you guys still love it for some reason. So we'll talk about it. One reason you love it is because there's a lot of truth in this archetype, right? So we got evil and we got good represented, right? I'd like you to think slightly different about these two characters, and I want to characterize them this way. I want you to think about Darth Vader as having a hero identity, not that he is a hero, but that he embodies a hero identity, and that Obi-Wan represents a guide identity. So, the hero identity, and maybe you could ask yourself if you ever act like the hero leadership identity. And I'm going to start with this first one because it's a little harder to understand. But do you rescue others so they can succeed? Does that sound like a good leadership trait? It does, right? It isn't. Can someone try and untangle why it isn't a good trait? Why would that actually not be helpful? Yeah? You take away their opportunity to learn. You make them dependent on whom? You. Does that feel good to you? that someone has to depend on you to be successful? You think Langley thought that way? Probably, right? Listen, I've got the money. I can put you in touch with politicians and the press. Like, you're kind of dependent on me. That makes him feel pretty cool, right? Okay, take a look at these others and maybe ask yourself in your daily life, if you're always off and sometimes are rarely doing some of the things, like villainizing threats to your identity. This is, let's say you were an all-state athlete in high school and you're showing up to college with your Letterman's jacket and everyone's kind of giggling at you because you're like, this isn't high school anymore, bro. Like, but you like really care about that, right? And so you kind of get in a couple of fights when people maybe challenge you with that, right? Right? That's the threat to your identity. Or somebody, you're driving, you're 44 and you got the red Corvette, and, you think it's the coolest thing ever, but your neighbors are kind of snickering at you like, that guy's kind of a douchebag. Right? Like that's kind of what that means. Command and control. You think about Darth Vader, you think about Langley, in service of self. In a meeting, you're the one that talks all the time because people love to hear you listen, or at least one person in the room loves to hear you listen, right? You. And you really see things from the perspective of yourself, right? So that's the hero identity. How do you get the hero identity? Like, why would somebody behave like this? We all think it's kind of stupid. We all know it's kind of stupid. It only happens 1 million times a day, in truth. I mean, it happens to millions of people a day, not 1 million times. Like, why would you? What leads to this, do you think? Yeah.
Vanity.
Vanity. Where does vanity come from?
Like just thinking that you're better.
Yeah. If you're not better, how vain are you?
You might still be really vain.
You could be. Who are the most vain people, typically, in a category? I don't mean men or women, or I'm not talking about demographics. What was Langley's story before he started building an airplane? Accomplished. He was successful. He had people knocking at his door to interview him from the press, from the government, right? So his success actually was the downfall. It was his problem. His success became his problem. And I think the same thing happened to Anakin, right? That's Darth Vader's name before he was Darth Vader, right? He was amazing. He had powers from the Force. He accessed the Force in a way that, and he thought he should be accelerated. He thought he was entitled to some things. He wanted to be in charge. And when he wasn't, it really frustrated him, right? Okay, so be thinking about where you might have some of these behaviors. We often call the hero identity somebody that is vain or cares a lot about their ego. But most people don't like to be told that they've got an ego. So I just say you've got a hero identity. So here's the cool thing. If you can remember just this, that for the hero identity, your past actually becomes a stumbling block. Langley's problem relative to the Wright brothers was his past, all of his success. His success got in the way of him succeeding in the thing that mattered most. None of you recognize Langley. You all recognize the Wright brothers. Right? And his past success got in the way. So it was a stumbling block, right? So the hero identity really cares about themselves and sees the world through their lens of themselves. They see themselves as a hero. Langley thought he was the hero. And Darth Vader thought he was the hero, that he was the guy that should rule the world, the universe, right? And they also then, if you have a hero, what do you have to have in any story? A villain. So I don't know, but if I was going to give you a test, that would be a question I'd ask. And it's a really simple question. But if there's a hero, what must there be? The answer is villain, right? So if you're acting like a hero, I can guarantee you, you are villainizing people. Does that sound like a good leader? Does that sound like a good husband or wife? Does that sound like a good business partner? Right? Those are people that blame others, right? Who want to make themselves feel better by pushing people down, right? So, in leadership, the hero identity leader has all the answers. They want to control information, and guess what's happening? They become the bottleneck. You hire people and they're all excited to go solve the problem and build the plane, and then the hero comes over and says, "Why are you building that out of paper? Don't you know it should be balsa wood?" And the guy's like, "No, I've tested this. Paper's a lot better." Wait a minute. Who has the PhD here? You or me? Right? And Langley's like, all of a sudden, every question has to be answered by Langley, right? So in a business, that's a killer. When one person has to make all the decisions, I can guarantee you no growth. I've seen this hundreds of times with small businesses where the founder starts a business, gets to $1 million in revenue, and stops. And by the way, got to $1 million fast. This looks like it's a rocket. Gets to $1 million, $1.5 million. What happens? Who has to be in charge? Who's the bottleneck? And by the way, who wants to work for that person? Nobody. Trust goes out the door because no one feels like they can work on the problem too. All they're doing is doing what they're told. And this is, by the way, how business ran for hundreds of years. Any of you want to work in that business? No, you want to go in and make decisions for yourself and think about problems and solve them, right? That's the great millennial generation right there. So that you're not going to work for Darth Vader, and you're not going to work for Langley, right? What happens? If you're an employee and then somebody treats you like that, what do? Do you show up excited on Monday to get the job done? No, you're excited on Friday to leave to get away from the boss. Do you start solving problems? No, why don't you solve problems?
Because you're not allowed to.
You're not allowed to, and if you suggest something, what happens? It's not good enough, it's not what I thought. You know, why are you thinking about that problem? You're not the boss. Right? Some really cool things, and I'm sorry, this came to my mind and I can't think of the specific example, but yeah, I think it's the Egg McMuffin. Anybody like the Egg McMuffin or eat the Egg McMuffin? I'm not a big fan of McDonald's, but when I'm on a road trip, I'm always eating the Egg McMuffin. That's where I eat breakfast, right? Somebody working the grill invented the Egg McMuffin. That did not come from the CEO's brain. It didn't come from the executive team's brain. It didn't come from the product development team's brain. It came from a guy working the grill. Probably had just about the same education as the Wright brothers, right? Somebody wanted to listen to them, which is a miracle. Says something about McDonald's, but business wasn't done that way back 25 years ago when you guys think the Egg McMuffin was probably invented by the caveman, but I know for a long time all you could get at McDonald's was hamburgers. And there was no chicken. Okay, so as an employee, you're holding back. What does that tell the leader, the hero leader? What does the hero leader think about you as the employee? Well, it just means he's got or she has to start writing you harder, checking when you come in the morning and when you leave at night, and how long your lunch is, right? And then what does that do to the culture? Just kills it, right? No trust. Don't want you enrolled in the problem. I don't really care about why you're here. Just do your job. Listen to what I say. I'm the boss. I founded this business. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have a job. I'm entitled to the best parking spot. I'm entitled to the biggest office and the biggest desk and the most assistants to help me get my dry cleaning done. Right? So that mentality just creates this crazy cycle, which then just helps the hero feel more like the hero. Because if I don't ride you, if I don't watch when you come in, you won't work hard. So I have to. I don't even have a choice. I'm the boss. I have to keep track of you. That's my job, right? And they're blind to the problem that they what? They created the problem, and now it justifies them being the hero. This only happens every day in every company by somebody. And it's what we're trying to change, and I think you can change it by being different and by demanding something different. You want, by the way, this is like running with a windsock behind you. You just can't progress as a company. You won't succeed. Growth slows. It's a killer. And the same principle applies to your career. It'll be a killer and hold you back if you're going to behave this way. And I know nobody wants to, but as soon as you get some success, let me tell you, it will be hard to not be that person for a little while until people start saying, yeah, you're no fun to be around anymore. You're kind of a jerk. I noticed you got the cool parking spot. You don't want to go to lunch with me anymore. It happens. So, be a guide, and by being a guide, think about Obi-Wan, trait trust, more success and performance, better engagement to the problem, more innovation. It's really having no ego, not being fearful of anything, not feeling like you're going to look stupid, and most importantly, for the guide, the past is a building block for the future, and what it turns into is it turns that sock around, so actually it puts wind in your sails, and you get more lift and progress and speed than every other company. It's a competitive advantage, right? And so here's how it works. The guide sees himself as a servant or somebody that's there to help rather than manage. And they really focus on multiplying the potential of others. They're caring about what they're doing for you, not what they're doing for them. It's a view outward versus a view inward. The hero identity is a view inward, and the guide identity is a view outward. So, the guide has all the what? If the hero identity had all the answers, what does the guide have? All of the questions, right? They're going to ask a lot of questions. So you'll know if you feel like you need to give all the answers or you are giving all the answers as a leader, you are being a hero in that moment. If you are asking lots of questions, and by the way, when you ask questions, what does that denote to everybody? That you don't know everything. Is that going to feel comfortable to you? Sometimes it won't. We're becoming a learning culture, though. So it's more comfortable. Back in the day when Gordon was working at Nike and I was working as an investment banker, like not knowing something was not comfortable. You feared for your job, right? Today we got a little more vulnerability, fortunately, and we can say, I don't know that answer. And you know what? You're right. The internet might know more than me. So I'm going to be okay with that, even though it took me about 41 hours to get over it. So, what about information? The hero identity controls information. What's the guide going to do with information? Share it, right? And they become the decision, what? This isn't as obvious, but there was a bottleneck before with the hero. Now what's the guide going to become? What do? It's a verb. They enable decisions, right? They drive authority down to the information where people can make decisions, which is pretty cool. And then instead of suffocating trust, they obviously create trust, right? So what happened to employees? How does that make you feel when someone treats you that way? Obviously, creativity, innovation, learning and growth scale, it all gets enabled. It all gets empowered. And people lean into it. And what happens? The leader then gets to do something more important than have all the answers. The leader gets to help people understand the why, which is where when you mentioned Simon Sinek, that came from the book, right? Find Your Why. How we're going to do it, how we treat each other. The leader can lead more strategically. The hero identity leader ends up micromanaging, worrying about details, and the business stops growing because in a fast-paced, changing world, you've got to be looking forward. Somebody does. This lets the guide think about the future. The guide is thinking about the future. They're investing in people today for something in the future. So the guide becomes a powerful leader that's strategic, that companies will value. And even if you don't have a ton of experience and wisdom, where the past starts to become your building block instead of the stumbling block, you still can treat people in this way and have tremendous value for companies that you work for. Okay, so ask this question. This is get your pencil out or get your laptop out or your tablet, whatever. I want you to write the answer to this question. This isn't an easy question, I get it. This won't be on the test, guaranteed. I guarantee it. What haven't you accomplished in the past 2 years that you thought you would? Something that you cared about, wanted to do, and it escaped you. Think about that. This is an exercise that isn't easy. It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's worth doing. It's going to help you. I'll be honest with you. I have a hard time doing this exercise because I don't care so much about the past, and I kind of like trying to move on. So if something doesn't work, I'm like, okay, I just sort of was born that way. But go back and say, you know, what really did you care about? And it didn't work. And not why it didn't work yet isn't important. We're going to work on that. But just find something that like, yeah, I missed that, you know, and I wish I would have. So, okay. So, what's the story? What story were you telling yourself? Let's say you wanted to, you know, I wish I would have lost 25 pounds in the last 2 years. That's what I was going to try and do. And I didn't, you know. What's the story I have? What in my past clouded my judgment on that? Well, you know, people my age can't lose weight. That's a good story. And so I'm going to be okay with that. I'm not sure I'm healthy enough to start working that hard. I don't want to have a heart attack by going out and trying too hard, so I got to start slow. And I started slow enough that I never got there, right? So think about what story could you be telling yourself, and this is being honest with yourself. This is some self-reflection that sometimes is challenging that we don't do enough of. What story could have you been telling yourself? You know, maybe kids from small town. I'm from a small town. I'm from a small town. I can't get a scholarship. They don't give scholarships to people from small towns. That's a story, right? Is that true? Do you think we could find evidence that somebody got a scholarship from a small town? I can guarantee you it's true. But maybe that's a story your parents told you, or, you know, is there a story that, yeah, you know, people that come from our side of the tracks, or people that come from our family, or, you know, you guys, I just watched Holes. You guys ever watch Holes? My millennial sons, the one's 20 and one's 24, they loved Holes, and we hadn't been together as a family for a little while, and they came to town, and we got together, and they're like, yeah, what do you want to do? We want to watch Holes, right? So we had to find Holes and rent it from iTunes. And if you guys know the character in Holes, he thought his family had a curse, right? That's the whole premise of the story. And a lot of his life was blamed on the curse. And his ancestors blamed him on the curse, etc., right? That's a story. Not true, a story, right? So you guys got that? Where are you being the hero in this story? What do you think you deserve? Yeah, I deserve to sleep in. I worked hard yesterday. I was going to get up and ride my bike, but I deserve to sleep in because I worked really hard. And actually, I'm in better shape than most people think. Like, if you really wanted to test me, I'm probably in better shape than most people think. Right? So how are you thinking about the problem in yourself that maybe you're being a hero, right? Maybe you deserve things. Maybe you feel entitled. And lastly, who are you blaming in the story? Because I can guarantee you, if you didn't get something that you wanted, some of these things have come into your mind. You blame somebody, you blame a teacher, you blame a parent, you blame a friend, you blame the internet, you blame the Republicans, you blame the Democrats, You blame Tom Brady, you blame Beyonce, like, right? There's somebody who's gotten in the way. You spend a little time focusing on people that have nothing to do with you, but you focused on them, and it's distracted you, right? So, these are things you could ask yourself every time when it's not working, when you see yourself sort of stuck at 9.2%, like man, I'm struggling, and you might go ask your parents or something. And they're asking you, why can't you get better grades? What's the problem? And we're paying for this, and you're not holding your end up of the bargain. Like, ask yourself those questions. Like, is there a story going on here that I need to face and be honest about? And am I being the part of the problem by the way I'm looking at it? And am I blaming people? Because obviously there's a villain if I'm the hero. Guaranteed, if you can identify that you're being a hero in some way, you've been villainizing something or somebody, and it's probably somebody. And husbands do it to wives, and wives do it to husbands, and kids do it to parents, and parents do it to kids, and neighbors do it to neighbors, and Republicans do it to Democrats, and Democrats do it to Republicans. And the Patriots do it to the Eagles. And everybody else does it to the Patriots. Here's the truth. So this would be a good test question if I was running the class. The problem isn't the problem. The problem's the way you see the problem. Remember nothing else but this. Your past is a stumbling block to your future, and that the problem isn't the problem is the way you see the problem. And we never want to believe this. And we're wrapped up in it, and we got emotional about it, and we got our ego involved, and our feelings got hurt, and we make bad decisions, and we stop making progress in the things we want because we aren't solving the problem. We're all caught up in the drama around the problem. This is what has become known as drama. And all of us do it. And I'd like to just say, stop doing it. That'd be a good. How do you have more success? Stop doing it. Stop having drama. But we create drama. It's because something in our past has prompted that. It's deep in us. We don't even know it. It's happening most often unconsciously. But if you're aware of it and you can do this exercise, you are going to accelerate your progress and your success in life dramatically. Go from 9.2 to 90%. You'll be one of the few that can do it, right? So think about that. Here's a way to do it. Has anybody ever seen this example? Which orange circle is bigger, the one on the left or the right? This is kind of like the caterpillar butterfly thing, right? Most of you have seen this, right? They are what? Which one's bigger? They're the same size. Do they look like the same size? So much that before I came here, because I don't want to look like an idiot, I actually dragged it over and put it on top of it, just to make sure, right? Because that's how deceived I was. Even though I knew the game, you still, even though you know it's true, it's like it's true. This is a great, simple metaphor or an example of when the problem isn't the problem, it's the way you see it. We're seeing it, we're being deceived by something. And our eyes are deceiving us. And in our problems, it's usually our emotions and our ego that are deceiving us, right? So, here's an opportunity. When you have a problem, and you're having a hard time seeing it, and you're not making the progress you want, and you probably think you're right, but you keep having problems, which tells you aren't right, go get a different perspective. Now, I'm going to tell you, don't go, this isn't going to be very popular in some places, but don't go to your parents, don't go to your best friend, and don't go to your siblings. Why would I say that? Because why?
Because they will say nice things.
They love you, so they'll say nice things, which might not be helpful, right? But it'll make you feel better, so maybe you will do it. Yeah.
There's a good chance they already have similar viewpoints.
Exactly. They're in the problem too. They're almost guaranteed somehow wrapped up into this. And by the way, if you cried every time you didn't get your way when you were 4, 7, 11, 15, 18, and you go ask your older brother for help, what does he think you're going to do? Cry. Do you think that's going to help you? That's not going to help you. So listen, I'm all for family, so don't get me wrong. But when you have a problem, and it's drama in most cases, and it's your ego, and it's the way you're behaving that's part of the problem, going to people that love and know you isn't going to help you. By the way, have you ever done that before? Gone to your family for help and had it not help? Yes, we all have. That's proof that it doesn't work. We already know that. But we kind of keep doing it. So I just picked some random people. Like, how would Steve Jobs look at my problem? The problem you wrote down that you couldn't get done in 2 years. How would Steve Jobs, the identity of Steve Jobs, obviously we can't ask him, but how would he come at it? How would he think about it? How would Mother Teresa look at it? How would the guy that, by the way, Alex, who climbed El Capitan, for me, besides going to the moon in my lifetime, that's the greatest human achievement. Like, I cannot believe that happened. I've watched that movie again and again. That is the most extraordinary human achievement. Like, maybe we won't have the impact of the Wright brothers, but equal. Like, how would he think about it? How would his mindset for fear and managing fear and preparation, how would he solve your problem, right? He doesn't have to know you. And you're not going to ask him anyway. But act like you're him for a minute and say, like, how's Alex going to look at it? What would Indiana Jones do? Hopefully your problem isn't snakes. But, fictional characters, Thor, like, how would these people look at your problem and go about trying to change it? And that perspective might be enough for you to start making different decisions and see the problem as it is. Going back to the problem isn't the problem, it's the way you see it. This might help you see the problem more clearly. And it can work in personal problems, it can work in business problems. It's a really effective tool. And it doesn't matter who they are. But if they're anybody that might know you and might know your identity already that you're trying to change, that you're a crybaby, their input's not going to help you, right? They're going to keep you as a crybaby. They're not going to want to change that. By the way, the hardest part of transforming from a caterpillar to a butterfly, the caterpillar didn't have this problem, but all the caterpillar's friends and family said, we don't want you to be a butterfly because then we're going to look like stupid caterpillars. We want you to stay a caterpillar, slow and overeating and fat and ugly like us. So those people aren't going to help you when you want to make big changes. Not because they don't love you and they are unconsciously trying to keep you where they have you slotted. Because their brain likes to categorize things. So they want to keep you categorized as a crybaby. It's easier for them to manage the file system.
Going along with the categorizing, it's something they're already comfortable with. They don't know what it could be like in this new
Right.
situation, but they're comfortable where you're at now, even
Yep.
if you're not.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, so when you're done, go home, pick 3 people, people unrelated. Serena Williams or Oprah or Mother Teresa, off this list if you want, or make up your own. And put 3 people's perspective on your problem. And then see what happens. And keep working it until you see it differently. And a solution, I guarantee you, in time is going to come to you. Because you've changed your perspective, that's going to change your identity, and it's going to change your ability to be something different. So, you're never really going to change things by fighting existing reality. Like transformation, you don't want to grow wings on a caterpillar. You want to become a butterfly. You'll never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. That's the story of the caterpillar. And this great philosophy by Lao Tzu is when I let go of who I am, I become what I might be, right? That's the breakthrough mindset, is being willing to let go, especially of your successes. Use them as a building block to become a guide versus a stumbling block that creates a hero identity. So, okay, we got 10 minutes, right?
So we did
Okay.
quarter challenge one week.
Okay, so anybody have any insights or takeaways or questions? If not, we leave early.
What has been, like, for even your personal experience and your career, what has been your biggest failure?
My biggest failure? Well, I'll tell you I think of, I'm struggling, right? Sorry, I'm stammering. I'm going to show you my biggest disappointment, but I've started companies, and I've had to fire, 35 people and close companies. That's hard to do because you guys have probably never had this experience, but when you have to tell somebody that, and they have to go home and tell their family that they don't have an income anymore, that's a horrible experience. So that's probably where I felt the biggest disappointment in myself, because when you're an employer, or the CEO or a founder of a company, people are counting on you to pay their bills, and when you're not successful, then it impacts lots of people, not just you.
Like, I guess the question was because I just want to know, like, you personally, how would you say you overcome that? Like,
Yeah. So I'll tell you, and that's why I was stammering for a minute. My biggest disappointment was I worked at this company called Infusionsoft. It's a really cool software company, the biggest software company in Arizona. The founder had worked for me, and he called me and said, "Hey, I'm trying to build this company, and I really could use your help." And he'd worked for me. I was kind of his mentor, and now he's asking if I could work for him. And I said, "Absolutely. I love what you're doing. I think you're awesome, and you're a great leader." And he wanted to hire me as the CFO. And so I interviewed with the board and the venture capitalists, and it's a big, important company in Arizona, so they took it very seriously, and I didn't get the job. And he was devastated, I was devastated. He wanted to hire me because I wasn't a traditional accountant, CFO. I knew a lot about broader business. I knew a lot about leadership and cared about it. He cared a lot about people. I taught him to care about people, and he wanted somebody that would help build his company that way. The board wanted somebody who had been an accountant for a lot of years and was like in a very narrow niche of expertise. And I had broad expertise. It appealed to the CEO. It didn't appeal to the board. And it was super disappointing to me. And he talked them into hiring me to do a different job on the executive team, which included overseeing the culture and leadership. But they were very skeptical. He took a risk on me. And I remember, so that was a huge, I'd never not gotten a job that I wanted. So that was the first time in my career where I just didn't get what I really set out to get. And that was a big setback, and I was ready to quit and move on. I was like, well, if that's the truth, then I should do something else and stop worrying about it. And he's the kind of guy that was not going to give up. So he kept on me, and he kept on the board. Anyway, we figured out this job. But a big important thing for me was going into the boardroom that first time and doing a presentation in front of the people who said, "We really don't like you. We really don't want you here." And I had to really work on my mindset and to get over, my ego was really hurt by all that, right? And I thought I would have been successful and deserved to be there and etc. Now I had to go in front of these people who didn't think as highly as I thought of myself. And the only way I got through that was this very cool moment where instead of being defensive and insecure, I just started with my presentation to the board, this first board meeting, by saying, "I want to thank you for not hiring me as CFO because I love the job that I'm doing, developing the culture and leading people." And I'd never done that except as a CEO, but never had that specific job. By the way, it's what's led me here today. If I get that CFO job, I'm not here today speaking about this stuff. I haven't figured out the breakthrough mindset. I'm not helping thousands of people be better leaders. And now it's my life's work. And it all came from a disappointment. And, I had to figure out the problem. Because I thought the problem was, they were screwed up. They didn't understand how great I was. Actually, they did understand. And I wasn't fit for the job they wanted, right? I couldn't see that problem. And then when I did, I was grateful that they told me the truth. So that's great questions. Probably have never told that story in public.
So along with, I guess, the hero mindset, right, and thinking that we are entitled How do you go about changing that mindset? Because I think it's really easy to talk about, okay, that's mindset is destructive, that mindset, hurts us and doesn't help us become better and help us grow. But what things, I guess, have you done or you've seen people do that have helped them overcome that mindset? Because I think we all have it.
We all have it. We all have it, and we will always have it. This, by the way, is the mountain without a top. The Star Wars story is interesting to me. I was super disappointed in, well, I can't keep track of all of them, truthfully. But when Rey went to visit Luke, right? And he was a big, angry loser on the island, right? I'm like, that's kind of pathetic. But there he is, right? A guy who had been heroic and done lots of cool things and grown a lot, and then all of a sudden is stuck. He's stuck. He's stuck based on a past experience where he felt like he let people down and screwed up, right? I don't remember the whole story, but he had all this fear and anger, and his whole past was keeping him from contributing, and she was trying to draw him out of that, right? That's it, right? We aren't going to get it all figured out. It's a journey of our entire lifetime. The thing I think to ask yourself always is, can I get a different perspective? And be a learner. Being a learner and being willing to ask questions and not have to know the answer is, anytime you're feeling like this might be in the way, start asking questions. Start being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know, or I'm not prepared. Like when you face those things, then you can work on them. So you're going to have it. We all are. Ask questions. Be vulnerable. Be humble. Be a beginner. Be ready to learn. Let go of your past successes and your past failures and not let them control where you're going in the future. And it's exercises that you can do to clear the canvas. Like write them all down. Write all your accomplishments. Write all your failures. Did this in the last class that I taught here with Gordon. And then cross them out and see how that feels. Some people feel relieved. Some people feel hurt that they had to, scratch out all those things they worked so hard for when they won the swimming meet. And then they were in like 5th grade and they got a trophy, and then they went for ice cream with their parents and the whole neighborhood came. Like some people, honestly, that still matters to them. By the way, it's going to get in their way of doing something else great. Right? So letting go of your past, really, that quote by Lao Tzu, letting go of who you are to be who you might become is the key to that. And having people help you with that by getting others' perspectives. And when you're an employee, when you're a leader at a company, the biggest question you can ask is, this is a magic trick, I'll tell you, the most important question you can ask is, what am I doing to get in your way? Leaders don't ask that question. They're like, hey, how can I help you? Because I'm the leader and I know everything, and I'm put here because I was the best at what I do. But when you say, what am I doing that's getting in your way? First time, no one will say, oh, nothing, you're great. You're the best leader I've ever had. Second time you ask it, well, yeah, I'll think about it. Third time they're going to say, yeah, you keep asking me to sit in these meetings all day and you talk the whole time, and I can't get my job done. So I don't get a bonus, and now my husband's mad at me. That's the problem I have. So why don't you stop that? Right? And if you can hear that and say, I'm sorry, I understand that. Let me tell you why I need these meetings, and maybe together we can figure out a better solution, different agenda or whatever. You start working on the problem. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, wait. I'm going to take a selfie of this experience.